Board.
All right. Okay.
I'm just going to pin you now, and I'll just let everybody in 1 minute.
Sure thing.
Okay, so welcome everybody, and this is our second talk. And as we mentioned this morning, this is our first week-long experience of International Fashion Illustration Week, as we call it. And I guess we're joined by an illustrator who's been sort of in my radar or on my radar for a few years, and I've seen his work, Vincent Nappi, and I think Vincent not only is an amazing draftsperson, but a superstar drawer, mark maker, composition, storyteller, and I think Vince is going to explain more about it. But we're lucky to see people still drawing with this sort of very sort of spontaneous, uber creative technique, and not really moving over to digital. I don't know. You're going to tell me, Vincent, more. But I guess what would be really interesting for you is, before you kind of start your presentation, is really explain about you, your sort of journey into illustration, drawing, and then you can share your presentation. But thank you for coming today, and it's a blessing to see you in the flesh, rather than through Instagram, and kind of hear from you direct. And we're really lucky to have you. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Patrick. I appreciate it. Well, I mean, if you want me to start at the beginning, I'll try and give the condensed version. But fashion illustration really wasn't on.
Oh, sorry, I've muted them.
Hello. Oh, there we go. So fashion illustration really wasn't on my radar until my early 20s, and I came to it in a pretty circuitous way. And all of it for me started out of this graphic novel that I created over 10 years ago now. And the drawings that I was making as warm-ups to dive into this book wound up sparking this whole interest in this field, and took on a sort of a life of its own, and have become this this tottering pile of drawings that I carry with me from place to place that I call the stacks. But my journey into illustration was really through a handful of amazing teachers. I was really fortunate to be a part of a program in the States called the Illustration Academy for a few years, which was started by a gentleman named Mark English, who was really one of the last Mad Men era great illustrators. So, he was the kind of guy who could walk down the street in New York City and people would know who he was when that was still a thing for illustration. And this program brought together some of the best illustrators in the country every summer to teach for a month. And I just got involved very heavily with the instructors there, and they opened my eyes to a much wider world. But their focus was editorial, was comic books, was fantasy, science fiction, book covers, things like that. Sort of a pretty different world from fashion. And if you saw any of them, you certainly wouldn't think that any of them were into fashion, because the fashion was Hawaiian shirts and cargo shorts every summer for these guys. But just some of the best draftsmen and women on the planet. These guys and gals could draw circles around everyone, and so they really passed on a love for the tradition of the craft, but also a love of just making pictures, getting your hands dirty, drawing and painting, an eye for composition, all of the things that that an artist should be obsessed with. That is sort of the bread and butter of the trade. And that's I'll leave that as the very condensed version, but I'll just say that I was really blessed with who taught me, and they put a spark in me that's continued to last until the present day. And it's something that I hope I can communicate and pass on to people, anyone who decides to listen to what I have to share.
Yeah, and I guess we can start sharing your deck,
Sure.
and you can kind of go through it. But I guess what people will pick up is your real understanding of figure,
Mm,
the garment, because you do so many different elements to what you do. I can see there's erotic stuff, there's a whole realm, and there's other illustrators that we've spoken to, and I think with what yours has is that sort of rawness, very sort of dynamic, um, and always and volume. I think that's
mhm.
the interesting thing is a lot of people think you can be overproductive, but I think in your world is you can be underproductive because I see there's sheets, there's like hundreds and hundreds
Yeah.
drawings, and it's fascinating to watch when I'm looking as a voyeur watching you and doing the work that you do. And I know there's a few other fans on here, but it's just to see the volume of the amount of work you do. And one of the things I always, when I first started doing what we do, is I really wanted to see illustrators at fashion shows. And I'm
Mm,
really still trying to fight for that because photographers have such a place within the fashion show. But
yeah.
fashion is a craft and artisan experience. And why aren't there? There's a few that are either stuck outside, um, and maybe we creep into the show. But I know it's all become celebrity driven. But
Mm,
to see someone, imagine if I saw you at a show and you've got this sort of movement of people who go to the shows, another form of documenting, and the speed and the originality of what you could bring to the table. I think it is missed at shows, I'm really pursuing it heavily. And I'd really love to see, rather than illustrators always drawing from afar, that they're brought into the fold. New York Fashion Week should be ringing you up saying, "We need you here." There's Richard Haynes who's drawing, but he's on the outskirts drawing what like a sartorialist outside. He should be
mhm.
inside every show, no matter what,
I think
covering.
so.
And it's a real. I think we're missing a trick here. So I guess coming. Let's see the magic. You've sent me your information. I want to see you share it.
All
And
right, sure thing. I
I'm
will say
looking
that
forward.
I had the good fortune to attend a show one year in Miami and draw live. And while it was entertaining, I don't think did a single good drawing. So just because everything is moving so quickly that it gets tough to hone in on anything in particular. All right, so I'm just gonna do the boring thing and ask, can everyone see my screen?
Yes, yes, we can all.
Okay,
I
cool.
can see it. I think everyone else can. I put them on
Okay.
mute in case there's any arguments in the background. So I'm answering for them.
Okay, cool. So I'll start at the beginning. Some of these slides I might breeze through, other ones I might hone in on just that are more relevant to what we're talking about here. Uh, but so, like I was saying before, I was really fortunate to learn from some incredible talent in the industry. These guys are all artists, and Society of Illustrator medal winners, and people know who they are in the business. Just a real blessing to be able to learn from these folks over several years, and to call them, friends. Uh, I will say that, I've picked up all my good and bad habits from them. So, but my path has been kind of circuitous. So as much as we may be talking about illustration today, that's, a piece of the puzzle. Like every other illustrator and artist out there, I've done many things to make sure that the machine keeps chugging along. And I think that that's an important thing that some people kind of brush under the rug. But I write copy. I've been one half of a branding agency. Uh, I've been a sales guy. There's a lot of things that go into keeping everything moving forward. But the art is the beating heart of all of it. So just some of the clients that I've had over the years. Some of them you may know, some of them maybe not, but they've sort of run the gamut from fashion to production art, comic books, a little bit of editorial. Um, it's a mixed bag. This this is a shot of a newspaper piece that I did. This was my very first illustration job. I think I was paid the princely sum of $100, and this is a full page sheet. I only have this snap here, but it was of, I think, Kevin Durant as seen from the back holding four basketballs. I forget what the story was about, but it was the furthest thing from my interests when I was commissioned to do it. But it was $100, and it was my first gig, so I said absolutely, uh, and I had fun. So we're just going to move into some jobs that I've done over the years. The one on the right was used as a graphic for print for a brand called Braden Alexander, who's an independent brand. I think he's based out of Washington, D.C. I'm not sure what he's up to today, but I got to draw a race car, so that was fun. Let's see. The piece on the left it's one of those pieces of production art that never gets seen because it's, it was bound by an NDA for a while, and it was used for a pitch, I think, for a script to get written or a film to get made. It's been many years. I don't recall. One on the right was a song cover, like a square for a song cover on streaming platforms. Don't want to do that. There we go. These pieces wound up being used for a brand called Innominate, and I'll show you how they got used in a minute, but it was sort of a strange assignment. Again, you get called on as an illustrator to draw a wide variety of subjects and to present them in interesting ways, and it's your job to use your brain and find out how to do that and make it a compelling picture. So okay, so we can see here, start to see how some of this stuff was used. But my process it's the same as every other illustrator's process. It starts with thumbnails, basic value studies, no intermediate values, just black and white. I want something to read as a silhouette right away. The detail and everything else can enter in after the fact. But
Are they done digitally, or are they done just with a black marker, or?
these may have been done with these may have been done in Photoshop. I
Okay.
don't recall. This job is a few years old, but I do them. I mean, I could show you in my sketchbook in a few minutes. I have a bunch of them, but they're all pretty simple. They're just for me. They're notations for me to communicate an idea to a client to get approval to move on to a final piece.
Yeah.
This is how they wound up being used. So
Wow.
I think this t-shirt was like bedazzled with crystals. I don't know what they were doing, but I was like, all right, do what you're gonna do. Same brand. I think this was supposed to be Kanye and Drake,
Yeah.
and it was the same sort of application. They were going to be used as graphics for apparel. Here is another graphic that wound up being used, and you can see here sort of the evolution of the process, my thumbnails to get to the final image.
And how long would these sort of take?
For the final piece,
Yeah, just in general.
uh, for a straight drawing in black and white, not long at all. Once I have my reference and I know what I'm shooting for, and especially if there's a deadline, then you're under the gun, so that
Yeah.
helps you work a lot faster. But if I'm going to go and paint on top of it, maybe a day, two. It really depends on how complicated the thing is going to get. But just for a single figure, that doesn't take me very long at all.
Yeah.
Uh, so for the next few slides, I'm going to cover some work that I've done with a brand called Akira Jones, which was really interesting. The art director Wale Oyejide, he contacted me when I was pretty new to all of this. And he took a flying leap and asked me if I had ever done, a pattern for cloth to be printed on cloth before. And I said, no, but if you if you're willing to go with me on this, I'm willing to work with you. So we started doing these very textural, raw patterns that he was going to be using to print on tailoring, and in shirts, and trousers. And these are several years old at this point. I would approach all of it very differently today, but he was new to the doing this, and I was new to doing this, and it was an interesting opportunity. He did work with the Black Panther film when it came out. So I believe this illustration I did for him is on this silk scarf that wound up being in the film.
Wow.
And so we would do also pieces like this, where he would, so like this wound up being a silk scarf. One of his main product lines are these Baroque ornate silk scarves. So what I would do is illustrate the main figures, and he would go in and collage together these backdrops. So I would paint the border, I would paint the figures, and then he would bring together all of the collage elements. And I liked what he was doing before we ever worked together. So it was nice that he decided to ask me all those years ago if I wouldn't be interested in doing things with him. But this stuff is very different from what I normally show. But I include it in this deck because there's range to any artist's work. It's not always what just looks good on Instagram.
Yeah.
But these were fun. Every time he hits me up, I make room for a project with him, just because it gives me a chance to do something out of the ordinary.
Yeah.
This is another example of the same sort of thing. So I would do the figure and paint the frame, and he would collage together the backdrops. So, I mean, pieces like these take substantially longer than a day, maybe a week. He never really comes to me with major deadlines, so they're free to evolve as they need to, which is nice.
It's quite a brave move to sort of juxtapose these two very different techniques together, and
Yeah.
it, it's almost it's quite disjointing, but it's quite nice. There's something quite weird about it. This sort
Yeah.
of very old Baroque style mixed with this sort of, it's almost like contemporary Baroque. This sort of very elaborate drawing, detailing, and I just think it's such a nice, almost a weird mix, but really interesting mix. And it feels like, is it futuristic? It feels quite future. I think there's quite something quite cool about that.
Patrick,
Yeah.
Patrick, if I may say so, it reminds me of some form of time travel,
Yeah.
history rewritten, the Madonna as a warrior or warrioress. It's like a transfusion of color into history, which was white.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting. I've never seen this, so it's great to see it.
Yeah, I don't know that I have this particular piece anywhere on my site. Um, yeah, no, he's a wonderful client. Like I said, I've worked with him for several years. He usually hits me up at least once a year to do something out of the ordinary and interesting. But I had liked his work prior to ever having him contact me, so it was nice to have the opportunity.
Wow.
And then sort of just on the opposite end of the spectrum with the boring stuff that tends to pay really well, but I'm never going to show, are things like, production slides for a pharmaceutical commercial. You know, uh,
We've all
very,
done
very
them.
boring and weird stuff.
Yeah.
This is the stuff that no one shows. But when someone's paying you $1,000 a slide, you say, yes, let me go. On the other end, you have more fun things. So this was some work I did for Mike Amiri a few years ago. I don't think he ever used these pieces. I assume the end result was going to be graphics for print again.
Yeah.
But it was, how could I say no to drawing a rock and roll guy in a leather jacket? So of course I had fun with that. I think I wound up using the process for this piece. I recorded a demo and I packaged that demo and I sell that separately. So I try and squeeze multiple uses out of work, even if it's client work. If it's stuff I can show, then I'll try and find ways to utilize it for my own ends. Let's see. Oh, okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about Noir Inc., which is my own sort of graphic apparel project. And basically, I started it because this was 2015, 2016. There was a glut of people starting very crappy graphic apparel brands out of their garages. And I think everyone was under the spell of, Yeezys and Saint Laurent and this resurgence of this whole punk aesthetic, which isn't personally my own aesthetic, but I like the visuals that come out of it. They're very appealing. And I said to myself, these other brands are charging $300 for these awful looking pieces. Why don't I just make my own and put them out into the world and see what happens? So that was Noir Inc. Here are a few of the designs that have been used, and I'll show you what they look like in just a second. But I tend to think of them just as little vignettes. I want them to sort of float on a garment. And then I have generally some little text, something flavorful to spark the imagination. So you can see how they wound up getting used. Me many years ago with a Perfecto that I wish I hadn't sold, and mean mugging for the camera. But it's been pretty cool. Like people, I've sold all over the world for this stuff, which is neat. And here's some folks that have worn them over the years. But all of this started with a graphic novel. Actually, I have a copy. So Sucker's Game. And like I may have mentioned at the start of my talk, Sucker's Game was the start of all of this. So I didn't really go to art school. I went to art school for a year, and then I had an opportunity to go to Kansas City, Missouri, and take up space in a dusty old warehouse and learn year round from some of the same people that teach at the Illustration Academy, which I mentioned earlier. And so that was my college experience, was me and 4 or 5 other guys at the top floor of this old warehouse, learning how to draw and paint. And in lieu of any kind of a senior thesis, I put together this graphic novel, which I recently re-released. And every day before I would jump into pages, I would start doing these fashion illustrations because the main character was supposed to be a clothes horse, and I wanted to get in the habit of understanding these proportions, what these characters would look like, how they would dress. So I started doing these drawings for myself, for my own education, and it wound up becoming an obsession, which you guys can pretty readily see if you dig into my Instagram at all. But it all started with this book. So just a few of the pages. And that led to other comic work. Pretty shortly thereafter, I was contacted by a writer to do some drawing for his own book called Victory City, which was put out by a publisher called IDW. And that was interesting. That was just sort of an evolution, me again learning to draw very quickly and roll with the punches. And as you can see here, while I've been doing all of that, all of these comic projects. They've contributed to the stacks. But we'll get into some fashion work. A lot of what I'm going to show you is, especially in these next slides, is really just been for me. These aren't for a client. These are for me, for fun. And for a long time, I sort of kept up a quota. I wanted to pump out, at least 2 or 3 a day. I don't really keep to that quota these days. I have other projects that sort of take up my time, but it's served me well. If you want to get good at something, you do a lot of it. And keeping that sort of production number in mind has kept me pretty fruitful through the years. So the color you see in these is digitally added after the fact. These all start life as black and white drawings, and then I will scan them in and toss color on top if it warrants it. The piece on the right, this was a job, actually. This was supposed to be for tour merchandise for Adele, but I don't think the client was very happy with the likeness, so they never wound up running with it. I can't say I blame them. I don't think it looks very much like her, but some more fashion pieces. This wound up being an album cover. I forget for who.
And you're as you just said there, because they kind of mix between really detailed to like this orange one, you're almost stripping it back a little bit. And I when I was posting some of your work, and then I come across some of these ones, I really liked these. I don't know, there was something about them where it's like almost much faster, and then there's these like graphic blocks, almost like screen printing sometimes. I felt like you kind of, maybe that's a bit of your t-shirt work coming back, where it feels like it's a little bit less overdrawn, and it takes away that animatic feel to much more graphic. And I thought I could really see these as sort of more fashion illustrations. They all have a role. I think that's what I'm kind of saying, is there's a role for every style or approach. There's sort of a place for it.
May I ask a question, please? You really have a wonderful understanding. I'm a big fan, by the way, big fan.
Thank you. Thank you.
I know, sincerely, but you have an amazing understanding of fashion, clothing, of the cut, the hang, the fall. It's like you had done pattern cutting. It's like a really clear understanding of garments in all of your work. And you have a really clear understanding of the anatomy, and you have a really clear understanding of putting them together and then adding your magical movements and stances, poses, and compositions. So tell me your secret.
The secret is drawing from life as often as possible and getting good reference if you can. So all of any skill that I have was built from hours and hours in a life drawing class.
Right.
Looking at a nude model and then trying to record what I saw, and then filling up sketchbook after sketchbook, sketchbook after sketchbook with just very banal subject matter, literally whatever, my hands, my face, my coffee cup, the person sitting across from me at a table, someone walking down the street. That was my lifeblood as a student, and it continues to this day in different ways, be the crux of my practice. Any skill that I have just comes from drawing over and over and over and over.
And the clothing, do you have a passion for fashion? Do you love clothing, or is it just an observation exercise? It could be grapes and watermelons.
I think that you can apply getting good at observational work means you can apply it to anything, but you're going to draw what you like ultimately.
True.
I happen to like this stuff. you know,
I think we all do in this
yeah, that's why we're
conversation.
here. So
That's our juice, our secret juice.
yeah, and that makes it easy to work on.
It does
Uh,
actually. Yeah.
yeah. So, you know, my interest maybe skews much more towards the menswear side of things
Mm,
than
mm,
fashion as a whole.
mm,
Uh, I think that's pretty easy. I mean, I draw a lot of women in suits, and there's a
mm.
reason for that.
It's true.
So,
Yeah, it's very true.
because I like the play of very architectural lines
Yeah,
against someone with soft features, for instance. I
yeah,
find that sexy. I find that attractive.
yeah.
I find that fun to draw. And I think that it provides an interesting contrast formally,
Hmm.
uh, you know, and as well in person. If you see someone that does that, it's a very striking thing.
I agree with you. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Thank you
But
for sharing. Thank you.
yeah, of course, of course.
I,
I
I'm I'm
will I
I'm
will add
surprised.
that, you know,
I was just
yes.
going to say, Vincent, that because you mentioned Yves Saint Laurent earlier, like that beatnik approach to style.
Yeah.
You know, if we think about the wide shoulder pad square look, you know, it taps into that sort of look. And Helmut Newton, you know, think of photographers, I
Oh,
instantly come to mind that jump out at me. And I'd love to see, like if you're in the UK, I would be going, well, maybe you'd hit Savile Row because there's some amazing tailors. And I could see, because tailors have a real understanding of craft, and I feel
yes.
they're missing the illustrators. There's a real misgrouping of illustrators and pattern makers, and because at the moment we're driven by either celebrity or stylists running the
Yeah.
system, and
And
there's
I don't think either of them are doing a very many favors to the people they're working with.
no,
Mm,
no. So I think we've lost focused on. If you think back to the Karl Lagerfelds, we think about
Mm,
Yves Saint Laurent. You know, I've worked with Holston as well and Balenciaga. You know, these great people that could draw and they understood design. And you know, we talk about Rick Owens as well, who's a sort of
yeah.
sculptor through design, and you know
Yes.
this truism to design as well. And I was at a meeting the other day, and they were talking about Peter Hawkins from Tom Ford, and they showed me all of his drawings. Amazing draftsman. So I think there might be, I don't know, an underbubbling of this, bringing back the people with the hardcore skills that really can communicate and translate. Because there's been a lot of failure in fashion through
Mm,
not really having all the core elements. You don't necessarily need them all, but this stylist role, a stylist coming up and going, that looks nice with that. The design
yeah.
elements kind of missing. Where like Kim Jones, he has a true, he did graphic design, he did illustration, has a real
Mm,
understanding of flavor. And as Patricia, who just spoke there, she was saying about your sort of understanding of styling, like the way you had them high-waisted trousers. That's a real design feature that not a lot of people would do. A stylist would do it on a photograph, but they'd have to do it live. They couldn't
mm,
anticipate or imagine it. And you're actually imagining what style could be before it's even happened. So it's quite nice to see an illustrator who understands style, and understands how to configure. You know, you didn't leave the t-shirt out, you tucked it in, you pulled the waist quite high. All them details are all attention to style. And then there's obviously composition, position, mood, atmosphere. And I think that's what's coming out in your work, is this real hidden. You may not, you know, you're, as you go around watching people and observing, not everyone has good understanding of style. So it's quite nice to see in your work you've picked up, because there's loads of graphic novel illustrators who
yeah.
probably never tap into style or
No.
fashion. No, I know. Well, one of my tutors was Dave McKean. So
Oh wow.
I
Then
was
you know I bow down. I bow
I was
down. Dave
I was
McKean
quite
is the
lucky to
man.
have a superstar illustrator
Wow.
teacher. So I can't get better than that. Um,
No.
so I was quite lucky, and you know he talks about a lot of the things you talked about, but he never spoke about style. And I think
Mm,
he always spoke about narrative. And I think that was his biggest. And
Yeah.
also he spoke about gesture. If you see like Black Dog and The Sandman,
Yeah.
it's all about the gestural piece that creates the story. And I think with yours, you've got a real mix of gesture and style. So it's nice. That's why I think it's quite good that you've got this fashion illustration tapping in. It's like this inner animal that's inside you coming out. So it's great to see what you're doing. So continue, and fantastic. I just wanted to kind of pop in there. So great.
Oh yeah. Well, no, it's true. I have more that slide deck is actually fairly old, so I thought I'd pull up some more some more recent fashion work. Those drawings are all uh, several years at this point. Um, but yeah, but the style aspect and that eye, whatever eye that I have, comes from a lot of looking at photography, at film, at everything, and trying to absorb people with good taste. That having good taste is the X factor, I think. And whatever taste that I have is because of who I've looked at through the years and whose powers I've tried to absorb by, working from their photography, or just again, just taking things in through the eyes constantly. And I like clothes, so I pay attention to the way that things fit, and I try and transfer that sort of felt understanding into anything that I draw. So something, because it's all about proportion and texture. All of the formal elements and composition, all of the formal elements in drawing and painting are applied in fashion and style and the way that someone dresses. Everyone is a composition. You have to pay attention to proportions or you're going to look out of whack. The way that you use color and texture are going to tell a story. I don't see drawing and painting and fashion as being all that different, except that one is communicated in 2 dimensions and the other is communicated in 3. So it's the same language as far as I'm concerned. And so I try and carry the same concerns from one into the other.
Right.
I mean, I can talk, let's see. So we were talking about before we started the presentation, I think you were mentioning digital and sort of how much of part of my process that is. I really didn't want to touch Photoshop for many, many years. I was like a self-proclaimed Luddite. But eventually, the client work and needing to do things quickly prompted me to start doing things digitally. I'm just going to flip through a few sort of fantasy and science fiction things where I taught myself basically how to paint in Photoshop. This has nothing to do with fashion, but I think that with work like this, I'm able to focus a lot more on things like composition and storytelling and so on that you may not necessarily get to with a single figure arranged on a page wearing, a jacket and some trousers or whatnot. But all of it carries over, right? I think that any illustrator worth their salt is probably fairly versatile in terms of what they can do regarding subject matter and things like that. Most of the guys and gals that I know that are really good, they have pretty wide-ranging interests. So it's not just fashion, it's architecture, it's music, it's movies, it's all of the arts, come together to inform the work that you make. And art is art. There's a lot of comic artists who can draw really well, but their only interests are comics, their work suffers for it. So that's that's all I have to say about that.
Well, there's another thing. I spoke to some of the design houses, and a lot of them said to me, especially in Italy, they said they tend to look for graphic novel illustrators to draw
That makes
creatively,
sense. Yeah.
because they're great at drawing the body, they understand the form, and they can really get the idea across. So
Mm.
I guess I had yourself, and I had Alessandro this morning, who
Yeah.
also similar background to you, he wanted more to be in comics, and then kind of got a job by luck, and
Mm.
now he's doing all the illustration work for Xenia, and
Wow.
he's doing so much work, and now he works digitally, and I think there's a real sort of need. I think the thing is people want to see good drawing, and they want to see people that understand the figure, and then from that they can then build off of it, because you have a role to help communicate what they want. So I think once you've got the core ingredients, which you have, I think it's really important that people understand that, like you were saying, you can shape what you do. And also other jobs that I've had, which I can see here, which you've missed, is film costume design. Like
Mm.
as a fashion, I was lucky to work on James Bond, and in
Oh,
that
wow.
film, I was given Christoph Waltz was my character. I had to design all of his outfits, and I had to understand the figure and him, how it could look on him. And I feel that what you're doing here, I could easily see you becoming a designer for Lord of the Rings. All these jobs, they need illustrators, they need artists, but they also need to understand design and fashion. So there's a
Mm.
whole realm. When I worked in film, they were saying we cannot find people like you. They do not exist. They don't exist. We don't know where to find them. So they get stylists, and stylists are just working direct. But the stylists are talking to me saying, they're speaking to like London College of Fashion in the UK, looking for fashion designers or fashion illustrators, and they're kind of all lost somewhere. But
Mm.
graphic novel illustrators are perfect for any part of film for costume design. Really, like we had another person speak, Daniel Page, who's an amazing
Mm.
illustrator, and he says he gets lots of work now because he's in LA. He mainly is working similar in film, music videos. You've got all of that areas. I'm shocked. You should have been contacted by now for film, because that is your next segue into I guess it would be knowing who is a costume designer in film that you could kind of reach out to, because you've got all the elements that is needed to be a designer or a costume designer for film, and you can create the story there as well. Like storyboard, you've got all the storyboarding is obvious, but for costume
Yeah.
design, like imagine like seeing your designs being used for a new film, like the new Fifth Element or whatever it is. Your work lends straight to it. And I just feel that seeing this, and you didn't mention costume design, that's why it flagged up to me, because
Okay.
your work is perfect for it. Perfect. So rather than it being seen as a fantasy drawing, it's seen as drawing for a fantasy film. Who's going to do it? Who's going to design the new Willy Wonka outfit? Who's going to design? Someone has to do it, and it has to be quite
Right.
magical. So it's lovely to see what you're doing, and from here, we're always here to share or pass on some ideas. Is your work in film would be amazing, and using for garment design, because you look at the details that you're picking up, and we're seeing Renaissance, we're seeing all these flavors where you're obviously picking up from your history knowledge, being brought in. So it's great. It's great to see all this, and what me and you spoke about quickly before we came on was the role of a creative isn't always going to be about fashion illustration. It is
No.
being versatile, like you just said, like when you said $1,000 to do a healthcare drawing.
Oh, please.
We've all done it and died doing it, but it sometimes comes across and it pays for that holiday, or pays rent for the next 4 months. But it sometimes it has to be done, and you're lucky if you can only just do fashion illustration. I think it's rare.
I don't know anyone that does it solely, except maybe David Downton.
Yes.
He's the only person I can think of that is his métier completely down the line.
I spoke to David Downton, and he told me, trust me, I've done it all.
Yeah,
So
I'm
he'd
sure.
been there, got the t-shirt. He wasn't a fashion illustrator in the beginning. He
Right.
he just got commissioned like a normal, like you would, and then got asked to draw at Paris Fashion Week. Had no interest in fashion, and then basically that was it. That was the beginning of his journey. So
Yeah.
I think, but film would be a great one. I'd love to see you do some costume work and film work. Would be
I would
perfect.
have fun with that. As you said, I wouldn't even know who to contact. Um,
We'll
it,
reach
it
out to our
seems like a lot of
community.
the film jobs, they wind up, there's a pool of, it's as with anything, it's network. It's who knows you, really.
Yeah,
And if you're in an industry town like Los Angeles, you've got a built-in network of people. There's a lot of game studios out there uh, that suck up a lot of talent. There's the animation studios that suck up a lot of talent. I mean,
yeah,
I'm friends with a lot of guys and gals that work in those places, and they certainly have their complaints. But it's
yeah,
it is an ecosystem that exists. It's worlds away from fashion, but there's people make it work,
yeah,
in whatever way that they do.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
they piece together how they
Well,
piece together.
we had Jessica Duran, who's a fashion illustrator, and she'd sent me some
Yes,
prints. She sent me prints that she did for a game. She said, "I've just done a fashion design." So the gaming companies are now looking at fashion illustrators to draw collections for games. And she sent
interesting.
me some of the work that she did. So no one sees this behind the scenes, what's always happening. And I got this print from a game company that she was like, have a look at what I'm getting up to on the side. So everyone has a side hustle. So
Yeah,
it is what it is, and it keeps you alive, and it allows you to do the fun stuff as well. So
yeah.
you know, this is great to see, and it's great to see what you're up to, and it's impressive.
Well, thank you. You know,
Great work. If
where
anyone
else?
has any questions, you can fire it in. I know Patricia, you had a few hot shot, but anyone else, if you've got a question, while we've got Vincent, we're quite lucky to have him. You can fire away. But I guess what another question is, if you've well, all illustrators will have a moment of no work. What do you do?
Well, so like I said before, for the past few years, a lot of my money doesn't necessarily come from illustration. So I've had retainer-based work doing a few different things. For the most part, copywriting, email copywriting. And I've had a client that I've done social media and video with for the past 3 years. So you get a handful of clients together on a retainer basis where you're providing a service that's reoccurring, and that, takes the form of a job, except that you're not going to an office each day. So it's freelancing, just like illustration, except the
Yeah,
money is not from drawing and painting.
yeah,
Uh, yeah, I mean that's the short answer to that. So when the work dries up with illustration, I don't necessarily have to worry about it quite so much, and I can just continue to work on my own projects. But I also do think, it's not just drawing and painting, right? I have a newsletter. I have various classes that I sell. I have Noir Ink, which is my, little plaything that I don't really talk too much about these days, but I did at one point. So it comes from various places. You try and have streams that feed into the main river there.
yeah. I think that's the main theme we've heard today happening is having these income streams from everywhere,
Yeah.
and they all feed into one stream basically. And
Yeah.
as long as it doesn't uh, make you sacrifice what you're doing as a creative, that you can keep the work that you love doing, the work that you're doing. That's what really it's worth doing these other little jobs so you can have the freedom to do your own work, and I think that's quite an important part. And how another, I guess another thing is, how do you find how's your experience of social media, and how has it been in the last 6 months to a year, where Instagram has almost gone crazy and lost, or whatever it's going? How's your Instagram? How's your social media experience, and how's the journey been?
So, I mean, my my Instagram, I've been on the platform since 2014. And the only reason I got on Instagram was because I had a client yell at me that I was missing a tremendous opportunity and that I needed to get on Instagram. So this was before it was really, I guess, popping in the way that it is today. And I built the bulk of my audience fairly early on because people were a bit more accessible. I had some shout outs from a few different designers whose work I was drawing, so they would share it. And that sent people my way. I had a few musicians do the same thing. And I treated Instagram like a job for a good long while. And I still do to a degree, but I don't put out nearly as much. Uh, but all of those, push-ups I was doing in terms of creating X amount of drawings a day, I threw them up there, threw them up there, threw them up there. And it was consistency. Things have sort of evened out over the past year or two, I would say. Reels have been nice. They do give you a lot more reach than you might have otherwise. So if anyone's not doing video, do video. If you're going to draw and you're going to paint, you're going to do all these things anyway, record your process. It's like the cheapest and easiest content creation trick I can think of, because again, you're doing it anyway, so just record yourself doing it. I hopped onto TikTok 2 years ago, and I did the same thing there. I said, well, if my reach on Instagram is not going to go anywhere, let me jump on the platform where the attention is. And so I had built, I'll pull that up. I built, my audience there is more than double what it is on Instagram.
Wow.
And I built the account in a little bit of a different way. So I don't really share talking head videos on IG, but TikTok, I built it specifically as an authority-based account. So I would film process and then I would record narration, sort of explaining what I was doing or just talking about some concept that I wanted to discuss. And what happens with TikTok is that you'll have a few videos pop and they'll bring you a ton of attention. And then you'll have a lot of others that sort of do, marginally well. But you have it's a good platform if you want attention. But I just see social media basically as top of funnel to get people onto my newsletter so I can communicate with them directly, so I can let them know about sales that I'm having, so I can sell classes. I build a real relationship with my subscribers there, because if you sign up, you get I have something like 75 emails in a sequence. So like every 3 days, someone will get a new email. And I started writing them several years ago, but they're just all about art, sort of the intersection between art and life and living life as an artist and how you make it work and what you should know to make the best pictures that you can make. And that's been the source of some nice and rewarding relationships with readers and folks that have followed my journey for a long time.
You are exceptionally articulate and nearly like a performance artist in the way you can pitch and sell and talk and allow people inside your head. I've always been fascinated. You grab it and I am hooked. It's an absolute talent you have.
Well, thank you, Patricia. I think that's important today to a degree that it wasn't necessarily for a very long time.
Mm.
And especially in a visual medium like fashion, That's all performance, essentially. It's all storytelling. It's all capturing attention and funneling it to whatever end you're trying to funnel it to.
So in some ways, your power of narrative is both visual and your articulation, your way of articulating your ideas is narrative also. It seems to be your spinal cord is narrative.
That's a nice way to put it. Yeah, I like that.
It's the gift of the gab. The Irish can't keep them down.
No,
I mean it though. It's
Thank you.
a sincere compliment.
Thank you, Patricia. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I appreciate
You're
that.
welcome.
It's good, and I guess before we end, what would you be your advice going forwards? Because I love the idea that you said Instagram is this approach and TikTok is this approach, and you've not said, well, I'm too old for that, or I'm not for this, or this is out of my. You've kind of embraced it, but in a whole different approach, and I think that's a very cunning way of thinking and very sort of
Clever.
yeah, it's and showing your versatility because you know, looking at your TikTok account, it's almost like watching television.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like
Like a
presenter
streaming
speaking to me.
service.
Yeah, so there's a TV service happening here, and someone's presenting, and they're giving us, and maybe that's from your copywriting knowledge of how to.
That helps. Yeah.
I can see, but I guess this is what I tell a lot of my students is to use all your skills, whatever they are, cross blend them. Don't just think just because I draw, that's all I do. If you play music or whatever it is, cross pollinate all your skills, and I think that's what you do with pure skill. And I think you know that's what I constantly see when I'm seeing here. I'm like, this guy's. It's like the Truman Show. There's a video of him. There's a talent to the whole process, and I think and it's taken seriously. I think that's the most important thing. There's no amateur here. It is consistent, professional, and I think you want to do it and you want to do it well. And I think that's what I can see. It's considered. It isn't just chuck it out and you know, it's like a plan. Did you make a plan? Like when you did your social media, especially TikTok, because TikTok looks really so orchestrated. It looks planned.
TikTok I came into with a lot more business knowledge and experience than I did when I started Instagram.
Yeah.
And my goal when starting TikTok was to build an authority-based account, which means that I would have to talk about what I was doing to prove to people that I knew what I was doing so that I could then funnel them onto a newsletter and then sell them things. That sounds very mercenary, but that's really the only reason that's the only reason I use social media at the end of the day. It's fun. I enjoy connecting with people, but it's a funnel. It's a tool. So like Instagram for me is a lot more fun. TikTok, I don't enjoy as much, and I spend very little time on it. It's to post things and then to get out. And really, ultimately, you know, if I had my druthers and several $1 million, I would take my phone and throw it into the nearest body of water so that I could make work and not have to think about any of this ever again.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, I treat my work and I treat the way that I think about my work as a business. And a lot of my reading and my interests, aside from art, have to do with business, with entrepreneurship, with how people create product and find markets and sell to markets and do all of the fun things that artists don't want to think about or talk about because it's not sexy or as fun necessarily. But with the same obsession and dedication that you or I would put into drawing and painting, you know, you've got guys that obsess over spreadsheets. That's not me, but they know things that are useful that every artist could take into their practice and benefit from. And, you know, having a smattering of knowledge around things like copywriting, around things like social media marketing, is only going to do an artist favors. You know, like you just said, you know, treating it as a professional, right? You treat it as a job. You have a thing that you're going in there to do when you do it, and so you get in and you get out and you reap the rewards, or you don't. I mean, I talk a little bit about that in my slide deck, but
may I ask you, does the newsletter strategy work? It obviously does.
Yeah, it does. It does. When I feed it. If I don't feed it, then nothing happens.
Feed the monster. Yeah.
You have to feed the monster. You know, some of my favorite business people are guys that have a newsletter of several hundred or several thousand people, and that is their main voice box online. And their business model consists of writing an email each day to their audience and selling something. You're entertaining people first and foremost, obviously. You don't want to burn people out. So you have to be able to communicate well.
Yep.
But you're entertaining.
Part actor.
What's that?
You're part actor, performer.
To a degree. And it's doing that in writing. So you're communicating an insight and you're putting an offer in front of people. And if you've demonstrated expertise and if what you're offering is useful to the person on the other end, and it's something that they're trying to solve or grapple with in their own life, then it becomes an easy decision for them to make. But I mean, some guys that do that well are some of my favorite business people because it functions as such a lean and mean model. It's a person with an Aweber account and Google Slides and Google Docs, and that's it. And obviously, depending on what you're selling, you can do very well. My entire journey as an artist has been trying to square this circle of bringing all of these things together. So these are the things that go on in my head aside from the picture making.
Yeah. You have so many facets that you've actually intertwined and thought about in such a professional and business-like way that it is a bit awe-inspiring. So well done, you.
Well, thank you. I mean, everyone's making it up.
And also, thank you very much for being so generous in sharing. Much appreciated.
Well, thank you, Patricia. I'm glad that anyone finds value in anything that I share. I mean, I'm making it up as I go along, just like everyone else is. So I don't really claim to have any great answers. I just know what I've done, what people who have this sort of success that I admire do, and then there's the art and bringing all of that together.
Brilliant. Thank you, Vincent. And we're lucky to have all these insights. I think that's what the objective of this is. There's a lot of illustrators and artists out there who don't always know how to think in a financial mindset. They're like, I'm a creative and I'm posting on Instagram and I can't get anywhere. And what do I do? And just listening to what you're saying is this shifting your mind in all these different angles and watching stuff. How do I market myself and how do I learn and how can marketing help my drawing and what can this do? And everyone's had to play that role, from Damien Hirst selling something to someone else. It's all a sales pitch. And I think that's what everyone has to remember is, Andy Warhol's the masterclass of it. He always spoke about good business was, the best of art is business. And I think that's what we have to kind of remember is that it is a business, as horrible as it sounds, and the love of art. We all love art, but we still need to survive. And I think that's the tough conversation is, I just want to do art for art's sake. Well, you still need to feed your family or feed yourself or whatever and have a roof over your head. And if you're having to do 10 jobs and you can't do your art, well, then you should have thought about, like, your point of view. How do I diversify? How do I think in different ways? And as you said, if I had £1 million, I'd throw away that phone and I'd do none of it and I'd just draw. So I guess it rounds up in a really good way. So, Vincent, super. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And it was a pleasure, and it's great to see you in the flesh and through digital flesh. Hopefully, we've had lots of people talking about what's AI, and at least we're hopefully speaking to the real version of Vincent, non-AI version. But for the moment, we'll believe you're real.
All right.
The AI version. But thank you, and have a great day, and let's catch up. And I really would love to do more, and I'm sure lots of people on here would love to have a work experience or have a workshop one day. So we'll plan to this, because I know you've got so many skill sets to share, from the business side to the drawing. It's the drawing, the magic that I really want from you. But the business is
That would be fun. I would love to do that with you. Yeah,
super.
for sure.
Brilliant. Thank you, Vincent. Have a great day.
Thank you, Patrick.
Bye-bye.
Take care, everyone. Thanks for
Bye-bye.
showing up.
Bye-bye.